All right, next lesson, paddling preparedness. In this lesson, we're going to cover preparedness and the briefing. Briefing is what we need to do before we go on any guided excursion, which teaching a basic skills course is considered a guided excursion under Transport Canada. So a briefing is, well, we'll talk more about that. So preparedness, getting ready to go out, what do we need to know? What do we need to deliver in a briefing? And we're also going to look at paddle plans and trip plans. So why we need to know about those. Paddle plans is part of our briefing. What are we going to do? Where are we paddling to? Trip plan is more of a multi-day thing or of a longer excursion. So I just want to draw your attention to the differences between them and when you might want to use one over the other. All right, so let's jump in. Okay, paddling preparedness, preparedness for the lesson briefing. Paddling preparedness is Transport Canada. Why we need that? Transport Canada requires all Paddle Canada instructors guides to give a short, and I put, Transport Canada requires all Paddle Canada instructors, and I put guides in there as well, because we'll look at what is the definition of a guide in here in a moment. Give a short safety briefing before the start of any course, clinic, or group paddle. It may be a brief statement, or it may be a more extensive or may be more extensive due to higher risks, such as particularly challenging portion of the waterway or coastline. Much of the information covered in our briefing will come from our preparedness assessment. Whether we are teaching a lesson or paddling with a group of friends, we need to be prepared for what to expect while we're on the water. We need to consider what should be worn, extra precautions to take, extra gear to carry, and the best paddling route. So preparedness, which we talked about in the last section, is all about using our 4Ws or using our tools, 4Ws, 4 pillars, to help us identify what conditions are going to be, what are the challenges that we might face or the risks we might face out there, how to mitigate them. And it's going to lead us directly, especially for the lesson that we're going to be teaching, into where do we need to go to paddle to, where do we need to be to conduct that lesson where it's going to be safe. So all of that falls into our preparedness. What's happening right now, what's happening, what's going to happen while we're out there, what can we expect while we're out there from a risk point of view, and what do I need to let my participants know to keep them safe while they're out there. The checklist, a preparedness checklist, should be assess the conditions using the 4Ws. We may use other decision-making models if we are going on an extended excursion. So I was thinking 4 pillars is more for something a little bit more robust than a 2-hour lesson. Know the forecast for the entire time you are expecting to be on the water. Note wind speed and direction changes and expected weather changes. We need to know that because if the wind speed changes, that might change where we're going to paddle to. Or it might mean that halfway through a lesson, if the wind changes, it's going to be hard for us to get back. So we might decide to go in a different direction to start. And if the wind is going to continue to pick up as we're out there, we might expect waves, wind waves as well. Determine what clothing or exposure gear should be worn. We want everyone to stay safe. We want to be able to complete our full lesson or our full paddling excursion. So we need to be dressed appropriately for the conditions to keep ourselves safe. Additional gear we should have based on the group or how long we will be out. Example, do we plan on paddling after dusk? We should all have a waterproof flashlight. Does everyone have the appropriate safety gear for the conditions that we're expecting? Does everyone have the appropriate clothing? Do we have snacks? Do we have enough water for everyone? And then a little bit more water again, just in case we're out longer than we thought. Snacks, food, water, or sun protection should be packed. So preparedness is all about what am I expecting while we're out there so that I make sure I'm prepared when I get on the water. The briefing that we give before our lesson, before an excursion, before paddling, is going to be drawing off of all of that preparedness, all of those decision-making tools, condition assessment tools. The briefing is going to contain bits of all of that. So we're doing all that preparedness to get ourselves ready so that we can ensure that we are keeping people safe on the water, but we're also using it so we can pick bits and pieces of it that we know we need to pass on to our students as part of this briefing. Part of the briefing should include confirm everyone is zipped and clipped. It's a PFD term. Zipped and clipped and properly fitting. Straps won't pull over the ears. Know and discuss the weather forecast and its impact on the day's course. Hey, the wind's blowing out of the west right now. It might turn from the east, so we might be paddling one direction, and I might say, hey, let's paddle the other direction, because we're just kind of addressing our paddling direction based on wind changes. Give them a heads up. Identify hazards in the launching area. What do we need to be aware of? What are we going to do if we start floating close to them? Rocks, for example. And how are we going to address those hazards? Well, the rocks are hazards and we don't want to float into them. The risk is, we land on them. We fall on the board hard. So we're going to stay kneeling in this area until we're past the rocks, and we're going to paddle away from them. Part of the briefing. Identify waiting area for the group while others are launching. I call this conduct a lot. Telling people what they need to do. We're all going to start, we're all going to launch here. We're going to point our boards out. We're going to mount our boards by walking into our knees around the handle, and then we're going to stay on our knees and paddle out, and we're all going to meet around that marker out there. Everyone hear that? Everyone good? All right, let's go. Conduct. Where are they going to wait for everyone? We don't want people just paddling and paddling and paddling and paddling. Otherwise, our group is dispersed at the beginning, and it's going to be a really tough lesson rallying them back in. Allow time for questions or comments. Anyone have any questions? It's an easy question at the end. Ensure everyone meets Transport Canada regulations. Those are the safety regulations, the safety small craft regulations. So a briefing doesn't have to be long. On the previous slide, we saw that it may change depending on conditions and if there's additional information we need to cover. But the same as we've been talking about in ideas, same as we've been talking about in all the other modules, when we are working with students, we need to keep it short and sweet and simple. If it's too long, they're not going to hear it anyway. They're already looking at the water, dreaming about paddling on the water and looking like, I don't know, looking all fancy. Paddle plans and trip plans. So why do we need to know about these? The paddle plan is part of our briefing. What are we going to do when we're out there? Where are we going to go? When are we going to come back? Trip plans, just want to draw the difference, or make you aware, ensure you're aware of the differences between them. And when you, as an individual or instructor, want to be considering the trip plan. All right, paddle plans and trip plans. A paddle plan includes the direction we will paddle to travel, or that we plan to travel, the route we are taking, identified meetup points and stopping points, and the time we expect to launch and exit the water. So a paddle plan is what we do, what we give as part of our briefing in a basic skills course. All right, it's 10:30. We're going to launch. We're going to be out there. We're going to be practicing. We're all going to meet up over there. Then we're going to paddle off in that direction, practice our skills. I'll be telling you where to go once we're out there. We're all going to be heading back and off the water by 20 after 11, so that you're all back here and we can do our debriefing and you're all done at 11:30. Paddle plan. If leaving on an extended trip, full or multi-day trips, we need to complete a more detailed trip plan. A trip plan should include participant details, names, age, medical conditions, allergies, activity details. What are we doing? Supping, hiking, fishing, skiing, cycling. Travel details, even though we're on a sup trip, we might be hiking for an afternoon. We might be hanging out in one place 2 days and another place for 3 days. And while we're there, we're going to be swimming, we're going to be hiking, and we're going to be fishing in the afternoons. Duration, departure date and time, return date and time, method and distance traveled. So are we paddling? Are we boating? Are we in kayaks, some of it? Are we paddling SUPs on another portion? And then we're getting on a sailboat and sailing somewhere else. So we need to give details on what we're doing each leg of the way, if it's not always the same style of transportation. Equipment details. What do we have? We have tents. What color are they? Vehicles. What color are they? Where are we parking them? Vessels. What do our paddleboards look like? Contact details, communication devices, distress alerting devices, emergency contact person, emergency contact numbers. All of this information we're capturing for somebody else. If we don't come back on time and somebody needs to come looking for us, they need to know when we were expected back, how late are we, where were we going to be at any given time, and what equipment are we on, so that they can spot us from a boat, the air, whatever they're using to search for us. So the trip plan becomes our itinerary, as well as all this other information, so that somebody knows if they have to come looking for us, what to look for, and what they might expect once they get there. All right, with the trip plan, you always leave your plan with a family member, a friend, or somebody who can contact the authorities. Some locations, when you are launching from well-known launch points, they want your trip plan when you leave as well, so that if something does go wrong, especially if you're renting their equipment, they have a plan to hand off to the authorities if they need to go look for you. Okay. So some other resources that are included in the resource bundle that I had at the very beginning, and again in the Paddle Canada section, that you might want to have a look at. They are copies of web pages that I thought were particularly useful. Transport Canada vessel regulations for guided excursions. So the reason I'm showing you this one is on the one slide when we were talking about preparedness, it said that because Transport Canada requirements are that all guides of guided expeditions or excursions need to give a briefing. So this tells us who's a guide. So worth knowing. When are we guides as instructors, and when are we not? By definition, a guided excursion is on a paddle craft or on a man-powered craft. Transport Canada is referring to any paid or unpaid leader of a group of people on the water. So a guide is a paid or unpaid leader of a group of people. So just because you're not in a paid class doesn't mean you're not a guide if other folks are looking up to you as a leader in the group. A guided excursion means a non-competitive outdoor recreational activity or excursion led by a person in charge of the activity or excursion, during which participants use a human-powered vessel. Other things to be aware of: if you are leading a group, a guide, if you are leading or guiding a trip, teaching a course, which would be us, or on the water in any type of leadership position, volunteer or paid, the vessel is considered not a pleasure craft as defined in Canada Shipping Act. You are now classified as being on a guided excursion and thus fall under these regulations here. There's another guide that you'll want to look at. You'll need it for the final exam. What does a guide need to have on their board? Because if we're not a recreational craft, we fall into different categories and have to carry different equipment. So you'll need to have a look for that one. It's in the same resource manual. So back to guided excursions that fall into these new regulations. This may include, but not limited to, instructors, guides, teachers, paddling schools, clubs, volunteers, Boy Scout, Girl Guides, church groups, camps, outfitters, or any other commercial or nonprofit organized group on the water. Note that these new regulations only come into effect when you are leading an organized activity on the water. You are not classified as a guided excursion if you are on the water with family or close friends where you are not looked upon as a leader, guide, or instructor. So that's important to know. Sometimes we could be classified as a guide, even if we're not thinking of ourselves as guiding. And as soon as we're a guide, equipment we have to carry changes, and we're responsible for giving a safety briefing. Other resource that's super handy. This is taken from the Paddle Canada website, also in the resource bundle that I put together. Suggestions on what to put in a briefing. So this is just a little bit of an aid for you of things to consider if they are relevant to the guided expedition excursion that you are going on. Ensure everyone's properly dressed for the conditions. You know, a lot of these are going to overlap what we talked about with preparedness. Ensuring everyone meets Transport Canada regulations, safety regulations. Not since our participants aren't guiding, they fall under the small craft regulations for non-motorized vehicles. Confirm, so they have to comply with those while they're out with us. That means properly fitting life jacket, sound signaling device. If we're at dusk or afterwards, they need a waterproof flashlight. There is the PALA Canada interpretation of Transport Canada guides. If your life jacket is not on your body and it's under the bungees, we default to being a sit on top kayak, and we have to have a throw rope. Confirm the float plan is accurate and fully complete. If relevant, confirm vehicles are locked and keys are in a safe place. Identify leader and sweep of the group. So you can read the rest of these, but this just want to point it out as these are valuable points to consider when you are looking at what might my briefing include. A lot of these are going to apply to multi-days, so pick and choose. So to help with the briefing, I've put a video below of what a typical briefing that I might give in front of a lesson. I'm not standing at the water, and I am in my backyard, but you'll get the feel for how brief it is, but the level of detail that I'm covering and where I'm trying to educate them on the safety of being prepared themselves. A couple of other resources that you might want to check out once you open up that resource bundle. Look for the sample float plan. That sample float plan is your trip plan. It gives you an idea or a template that you might use if you're going on a multi-day trip and leave that behind. There's an Adventure Smart, or included in there is an Adventure Smart trip plan guide. They do a great job. They actually have an app that you can use to file your trip plan and have it automatically sent to individuals who you want to send it to, and it'll notify them if you're over time. So a couple of tools that you can use to help you when you're putting together those trip plans. All right, that's it for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.